Hello, everybody, and welcome to Heartlight Vedic Astrology. And today's talk, I was going to cover symbolism of the ninth house, or Bhava, as it's known as in Sanskrit. And this is all from a Vedic astrology or Jyotish perspective, so keep that in mind. If you're new to Vedic astrology, Jyotish, or my videos, all of my teaching videos on the subjects are my concepts playlist. They can all be found there. And wherever you see a double asterisk in one of my talks, that means I have a teaching video on that topic, so you can learn more. Also, if you're interested in looking at birth charts of famous people, places, and moments in time, you can see my I recently published a birth chart archive list 2024 video where I list all the famous birth charts I've analyzed on this channel and the video that you can find them in so that they're easier to find. Um, Videos to watch before this one or with this one to get more out of this talk, North, South, and East Indian style charts. I do cover Western style charts in that video, but I don't have it in the title. Introduction to navigating a birth chart, introduction to the constellations or Rashis, constellation or Rashi categories. Then from the planets or Grahas playlist, you might look at the video Symbolism of Jupiter, also known as Guru or Brihaspati, because we are talking about the ninth house, and that's the ruling planet of that house in the natural zodiac. And then also, uh, I have a whole playlist on houses and bhavas, and this is the ninth of 12, so most of them are done. And if you're totally new to houses and bhavas, you might start with the first house, also known as the Lagna, Ascendant, Rising sign. All right, so there you go. Okay, so let's look at start looking at the ninth house and what that symbolizes. The ninth house in Vedic astrology. So again, Vedic astrology is ancient Indian astrology. It's more than 5,000 years old. The ninth house is also known as the Bhyaga sthana. So Bhyaga means fortune, so it's a house of good fortune. It's the ninth house in the natural zodiac. So the natural zodiac is when you take the first constellation, meaning Aries or Mesha in Sanskrit, and you put it in the first house. So just make sure you don't confuse first house with first constellation. Okay. So in the natural zodiac, where you do actually have the first constellation in the first house, the ninth house is ruled by Sagittarius, also known as Danu in Sanskrit, and Sagittarius is ruled by the planet Jupiter, which is known as Brihaspati or Guru in Sanskrit. Okay. So Sagittarius is what we call a dual fire sign or Dvasvabhava Agni. Dvasvabhava dual signs basically have this nature of being dual. So they can go back and forth or have kind of a sometimes contradictory nature to them. And then fire's all about activity. So this is, a house where there can be dual or multiplicity of energy or activities, okay, generally speaking. The other thing to know about the ninth house is it's called a dharma sthana. Dharma means duty. So when, for example, the ruling planet of the chart or the Lagna goes to the ninth house, typically I see that as, the primary motivation of this person throughout their life is one of duty. Okay, and that's going to be a high priority in their life. The other thing is that the ninth house, there are several dharmasthanas. There are three dharmasthanas. The other ones are the first house and the fifth house. And because the ninth house is the highest point in the sky at birth, related to the dharmasthanas, this is kind of like the kind of highest octave of dharma. So that's why the ninth house tends to be seen as something that's relatively pure or relatively spiritual. Um, Generally speaking, but if there are a lot of malefics or if there's a lot of challenge here, then the opposite may be true in somebody's life. Okay. The ninth house is also a trikona house. So the trikona houses are 1, 5, and 9, and generally seen as positive houses. It's also considered a punya sthana. So punya means good karma. Yeah. So this is a house, generally speaking, of good karma, again, unless it's, very much afflicted. So different kind of categories of things that we find symbolism for in the ninth house. Regarding health, the ninth house relates to the body parts of thighs, hips, and legs. And because of that, we would tend to see here or kind of assess here things like general activity, general motion, gait, mobility, flexibility, Also things like sciatica, like the big sciatic nerve that runs down the back of the, hips and thighs. Also things like issues with overestimation abilities. So again, because we're talking about Jupiter here, and Jupiter is the planet of great optimism. And sometimes we can be too optimistic rather than realistic and overdo things. So, that kind of thing can be seen here. The other thing is injuries from overexertion. So, again, this is sort of like issues with overestimation abilities, is that, when you're pushing yourself too hard to the point where you're not really listening to your body, or maybe you're a daredevil type or something like that, you might put your body and self at risk, then you might get injured because of that kind of overexertion mentally and physically. Also, things like cognition, because the ninth house reflects the third. And if you watch my third house videos, I talked about how the third house represents cognition. So the way that your mind thinks and processes information. And then the thing is, I would also include wisdom in the ninth house because Jupiter is the planet of wisdom. So whether somebody is wise or not, you might assess that through the ninth house. Okay. Then, in terms of people that the ninth house represents, the most obvious one or the most common ones are father, also guru, and teacher. So, guru is kind of I would say, a higher level of teacher. From classic Indian culture. Guru in classic Indian culture is somebody who that you completely surrender yourself and surrender your ego to. So that's slightly, well, actually quite a bit different than I think our Western notion of um, a teacher not being like authority that you bow to without question. So it's a higher kind of placement of the teacher. Yeah. But similar functioning people. So things like mentors, counselors. The other thing is satsang fits here. So satsang is a spiritual community. So, like if you have a yoga group that are a part of and participate in, or maybe a kirtan group, so chanting to music, different Sanskrit mantras and things like that, or the equivalent of other cultures. So maybe you go to synagogue, or maybe you go to like a mosque or something like that. The other thing is that kusang is also related to this house. So kusang is the opposite of satsang. So satsang is more of a uplifting spiritual community. Kusang is kind of the opposite of that. So it's like maybe you're hanging out with the wrong crowd, as we often say, or kind of the wrong folks who will kind of lead you down, negative paths that will create negative karma. That's a possibility. Again, depending on whether the ninth house is afflicted or very positive. Okay, then because these people, especially father and guru, teacher, mentor, counselor, maybe on a slightly different level, we can assess the ninth house for things like authority, and related to that are like, for authority of a country, government, and politics. Okay, the other thing is that the ninth house can be assessed for sibling spouse because it is the seventh from the third. Um, and the other thing is that you can assess things like children, grandchildren, and descendants because this is the fifth from the fifth, and the fifth house represents children. And yeah, and then you can also assess brother or sister-in-law because brother or sister to your spouse is, spouse is seventh house, and then third from any place is the kind of siblings of. So siblings of spouse would be the ninth house. Okay. Then, in general, we look for, especially if the ninth house is very positively, oriented, just general indications of good fortune. So things like affluence, wealth, good luck, previous good karmas. But you can also see like fall from high office, also loss or change in career, if again the ninth house is, really afflicted, because the ninth house is the 12th from the 10th. So the 10th house represents like especially 9 to 5 career type stuff. And the 12th house, generally speaking, is a house of loss and expenditures. Okay. And then again, the ninth house, it's kind of, especially if it's well oriented, rightful prosperity and success based on effort or previous good karma, as you can think of it that way. Okay. And also, I've already you can already see, if we're talking about things like gurus and teachers and things like that. And good karma, this is a house that's also assessed for things like spirituality. How devoted is somebody exposed to and working from a paradigm of transcendental wisdom? Religious events such as baptism or the equivalent, in whatever culture or tradition that you follow. Things like charity and donations, generous offerings to others. Also, conduct, morality and ethics is here. Also, things like penance and piety and purity of mind. Again, this is another reflection of the third house of cognition and how is your mind processing, things in the world. Religion generally, worship and respect to others, because especially respect to elders, because again, especially in Indian culture, that's considered part of the Dharma is to respect your elders, especially like parents and guru. I mean, that's a really big deal. So, hopefully you're getting a vibe here, pretty strong vibe already with the ninth house, but let's continue on the next slide because I got some more info for you. So on this slide, the top part and then the chart on the right here, it's the same, but then the second half of the written stuff is different from the previous slide. So also from the ninth house, we assess things like higher education. So not higher education in terms of like college level, that's more the fourth house, but higher education in terms of like terminal degrees, like a master's level or PhD level or doctorates, or Juris Doctorates, so like lawyers and doctors and people who like go to school forever. Yeah, so they if that is true for somebody, if they have a positively placed ninth house, then they will typically have the opportunity and successfully go through and complete these programs. Okay. Also, this ninth house is related to travel, specifically long distance travel, because it is a reflection of the third house, and the third house represents more short distance traveling and commuting and that sort of thing. And then, if you combine the long distance travel with spirituality, you also get things like pilgrimages from the ninth house. Okay. Then, if we're looking at the ninth house in terms of assessing career, if somebody has a really strong ninth house, or if it's, there's a relationship between the ninth and the 10th, or the ninth and the seventh, or the ninth and the third, then you would estimate that these are the sort of categories of careers that somebody's likely to follow. So things like formal higher studies, so professors, university staff, philosophers, also founders of these higher institutions of learning, such as universities, founders of research institutes. And again, it's a spirituality or religious part of it comes into it. Founders of monasteries or ashrams, that sort of thing. Okay, and then you can also have somebody who's, on some level engaged in religion. So clergy, priests, rabbis, imams, that sort of thing. Knowledgeable, well-educated gurus. So not, well, as long as the ninth house isn't afflicted, if it's well positioned, then you would have like a really fantastic guru, as opposed to maybe a guru that was abusing their privilege of that position. Okay, then people like missionaries because you get the religious piece along with the long distance travel piece, right? Also, people who are experts in ancient religions or liturgy or classical languages, you would get that here. People involved in especially long distance travel, people are involved with dealing with other cultures or travel agents or foreign exchange students, that sort of thing. And then again, we have the authority piece here. So government, administrators, subcontractors of stuff. So even if you don't work directly, you don't have a government, quote unquote, a government job, or you don't work, in your city hall, or, you're not sitting in the White House, you might be a subcontractor. So maybe you run a nonprofit, but the nonprofit is mostly funded by the government. That would be considered like a subcontractor position. Also, like somebody like when I was in graduate school um, studying immunology, for the first few years, our funding, as a science, PhD level student, most of our funding was from the government. So at that time, I had an active ninth house, for example. So again, so even if, or like recently in the last few years, I think most of you know I'm also a physician. When my ninth house was activated, I live in a state where I practice natural medicine. I'm a naturopathic physician. And in the United States, we are not licensed in all 50 states. And the thing is that very few state governments fund naturopathic services for people. But in the last few years, while my ninth house was active, um, it just so happened we became the fifth state in the country, the fifth state out of 50, where all of a sudden our state government started funding naturopathic services for the public. So I essentially became a subcontractor for the state government. Yeah. So you can see how that works. Yeah. So also, not just like people who work for the government, but people who benefit from government support. So people who get like unemployment benefits, or people who live off of public health insurance, engage in that. They probably either have a, currently active ninth house, or a strong enough ninth house that they, benefit from that kind of support, social support. Okay, so you get a sense here of the different, aspects for, formal higher studies, religion, travel authorities, and how, you can get different combinations here. Also, in terms of administrators, these don't all have to be government, but, it could be, some national organization, like maybe head of the, I don't know, teachers association or the nursing association or something like that, where they become, again, even if they're not related, involved directly with the government, they become an authority by being kind of the head of an overarching, you know, um, large, organization of some type. It doesn't even have to be national level. It could be, in the town, or in the state, that sort of thing. So just so you get, different concrete examples of how these energies can play out. Okay, so that's the ninth house. As always, I want to thank you for, stopping by and listening to one of my talks. And also, I want to thank everybody for all the support that they give me and the channel through the different ways that you choose to support me and the channel. So whether it's subscribing to the channel, or liking videos, or sharing videos, or sending in donations, or posting lovely comments or questions, or maybe reaching out about personal birth chart readings. There's so many different ways, and I really appreciate whatever is true for you and your heart, in terms of supporting the work that I do. So thank you for all of that. Again, all of my teaching videos on the subject of Vedic astrology are in my concepts playlist. They can all be found there. And then again, if you're looking for more birth charts, famous birth charts to look at that I've analyzed on the channel, I would look at my birth chart archive list 2024 video for a list of those charts and which videos to find them in. If you are interested in a personal birth chart reading, I offer them live on Zoom and also as pre-recorded video. If that's of interest, you can email heartlightastro@yahoo.com for more info. And I do have another YouTube channel on natural medicine that covers other Vedic arts such as Ayurveda and yoga, as well as other paradigms of natural medicine such as homeopathy and naturopathic medicine. So the name of that channel is Nature Source Care, if that's interesting or useful to you. So as always, I hope you found this talk interesting, helpful, and useful to you as you learn to navigate the energy cycles of your own life. Okay, so until the next one, take good care. Namaste.